Hey everyone, welcome to Aussie Footy Chats, episode 8, Collingwood Trade Chats. So today I'm going to talk about the Collingwood Football Club, who they brought in, the draft picks, and the free agency. So let's talk about this year. So this year they sort of went through the season finishing in the top half. They were first for majority of the year on the ladder, and then at the back end of the season they struggled. They lost the prelim in the end, so they went down to the reigning premiers in the prelim, which was a hard fought game. They also made some list changes. They've got rid of Mason Cox, who's a key forward, and they actually dropped Dan McStay, which is on their list currently as a key forward, and bring in Mason Cox. So now they're key forward down, and they've dropped Mason Cox off the list along with Tom Mitchell. So that's a bit of the list changes. I'll just quickly go back to last year's trade period where they brought in Dan Houston, an All Australian halfback that played for the Port Adelaide Football Club. They also brought in Harry Perriman, a halfback from GWS, which was on a really decent salary, about $1 million a season. Dan Houston's almost about the same, just under. So last year they brought in halfbacks. I think that they should have just brought in the one and maybe got another key forward with those picks if they could pick one up. So I'm assuming their list manager would have went through that and tried to do that. But that being said, they have a hole in the forward line now with Mason Cox going. So I'm going to talk about who they brought in. So Jack Buller, the Pies gave up a 2026 third round selection as part of the deal that landed the ex-Swans Jack Buller. The deal that they received was a 2026 fourth round selection in part of that deal. So they also got a later pick for next year, and they got Jack Buller. So Jack Buller's 199 centimeter key forward, who's 24 years old, who's reasonably developed. Played a few games for the Sydney Football Club last year towards the back end of the year, and looked pretty good. So that's one of the replacements they got for Mason Cox to try and fill that hole. Also, an unrestricted free agent, Brody Mychek, was traded to the Melbourne Football Club. So the D's didn't dilute their compensation for Charlie Spargo. So his departure from Collingwood will be a big loss in Craig McRae's side. So they've lost Brody Mychek, which is their sort of mid-sized forward. So sort of still a key forward, but a mid-key forward. Kicked a lot of goals for him. So he's now left the Collingwood Football Club to go to Melbourne. So I'll get into that part for Melbourne and talk a bit about that when I get to that. So we'll leave it with Collingwood at the moment. So yeah, Brody Mychek had a really good career, premiership player for the club, and it's a big loss for the football club. Also with Mason Cox going, that's two of their essential part of their forward line, whether it's from the mid-size to the tall end of the scale. With Mason Cox, he's an American footballer who had a good career, also a premiership player. So yeah, congrats to you, mate. He's still looking for another club. So yeah, there's talks of him going to another club. We'll see. So yeah, his career at Collingwood has come to an end. And yeah, Jack Buller's been brought in to fill that void, whether it's from Mychek or Mason Cox. So the Pies also had interest in North Melbourne's skipper Jai Simpkin, but the future second round pick they offered wasn't close enough to bring it in and enticing the Roos to doing that trade. So yeah, they wanted a first round draft pick, the Kangaroos, from North Melbourne. I don't think they would have took a second round. There was more talk of them wanting a first round pick, which unfortunately Collingwood didn't have. So yeah, the second round pick wasn't really enough for them to be enticed, and Kangaroos shut down that chat pretty quickly. There was a bit of talk with Jack Steele coming in, but that didn't equate to anything. And I'll go on to where he went to later on. So, yeah, that being said, so the GM of list and talent strategy, Justin Lepage, said the name was never mentioned by another club. So this is talking about Jordan De Goey. So they there was talk about Jordan De Goey maybe getting traded. I know a few of the people at Ken Corns did mention that it'd be worth them trading him out for his age if they could get a really good pick. But yeah, so Justin Lepage shut that down and mentioned that the Pies would back themselves in for another tilt for the flag this year coming up. So they also will start getting games into more of their younger talent. So yeah, Collingwood have an older list. I have a lot of players that above 27 into that 30 mark. So really, they've traded in those players that I said last year to try to bring in players that are older and experienced to go for a crack at the flag. But that didn't eventuate. So they're no longer, well, they didn't win the flag this year and they're going to go into the all in this year to try and win one. But also while trying to play some of the younger players. So that's quite interesting that the list manager has said that. So he's sort of trying to say that they're going to go for a flag but play some of the younger talent. So it's a bit of a balancing act. And Collingwood did trade out one of their young players, Joe Richards, to Adelaide last year, and sort of that part of the deal. And he was voted their best young player. So they've sort of drained some of their younger talent pool to bring in some senior players, and now they've sort of realised that, and they're going to play some younger players. So it's going to be interesting to see where the Collingwood Football Club sits this year, whether they can still keep in the top four and have a crack for the finals and a flag this year, while also introducing some of the young players. So it is a good move to bring in some young players, but at the same time, are they going to be able to develop those players while being in the top half of the ladder and going for a premiership? And how are the older players going to be? Are they going to be injured? Should have they traded Jordan De Goey? Is he going to play a full season? Could have they got a young player that could have been a high second round draft pick? I don't think they would have got a first round for him, but could have they got a second round and a third round in? I'm not too sure. Who they're going to go for in the draft? I'll go through what picks they have. So the Collingwood Football Club have picks 39, 45, 56, 61, 77, 95 and 113. So they don't have a first round draft pick. They got a bit more of a later second round and so on. So they're going to have to find talent that comes later in the draft. Whether they can package these picks together and maybe trade them off for a higher second round pick, it's to be seen, and what type of player they're going for. And I'll talk a bit about that further in the podcast when I get to the sort of drafting stuff and what clubs should look for. But yeah, that's just a quick look at their draft picks and what they've got, who they traded in, who's left, the list that they got, a bit of last year's stuff because they were big players in last year's trading period. So bringing in those two players, like I said, and trading out one of their younger talent for those two players. Didn't quite eventuate to having a season that they had at their previous clubs, but they still played finals. They made the top four and played in a prelim. Lost to the Premiers, which is there no shame in that. They're a great side. And when they went back to back Brisbane, as I've mentioned in my previous podcast. So yeah, they have a hole in their forward line. They've got a young key position player who's 24, 199 centimetres and can clunk a mark. So Can Collingwood develop him into a better key position player? Can Dan McStay break back into the list and play on the actual ground this season in the finals? And can he be the missing forward that they need? Can Jack Buller be that player? It's all up to the players now, and they've got this year to figure out, so the 2026 season. And they're going to play some young players from what I've heard, and we'll see what happens. So, yeah, it's interesting time for the Pies. It's going to be interesting to see how they go, whether they can sort of stay in the top half of the ladder. And also, they brought those halfbacks in to sort of give this guy here to my right, Nick Dacos. He's a gun midfielder. So, yeah, he finished pretty high on the Brownlow. Probably almost arguably should have won it. That's the controversy at that. They also bring the halfbacks in last year to try to get him off the halfback and be a permanent mid, which is an absolute must. I don't know how he was on the bench for the All-Australian squad, but that's a controversy for another day. So they brought them in. They probably had a hole in their forward line, which is what has come up this season at the end. So I thought they should have brought a key forward in last year and maybe just one halfback. And also, playing Josh Dacos on the wing or in the midfield more, which has freed him up more and made his game better. Still plays off the halfback at times too. Yeah, so they've got the hole in the forward line. They're bringing Jack Buller. They lost Brody Mychek through free agency. So it's quite interesting. They've only gone for the one. They didn't have many picks to work with. So that's more indicating what I was saying about last year's trade period and bringing in a key forward. So they've lessons learned for the club. They're going to play some more younger players. So, yeah, it's interesting times for the Collingwood Football Club. I would assume outside of injuries, they should still climb up the ladder. And that's the Collingwood trade chat and who they've brought in, the trade picks, free agency. I hope you enjoyed it. It's probably a shorter one compared to most clubs because it was quite a trade period for the Collingwood Football Club. And I hope the Collingwood fans enjoyed this. And we're going to talk about the next club that will be on the next podcast, which is the Essendon Football Club, alphabetical order. So we're going to follow that. And I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed this, Pie fans. And hopefully go well next year and see how they go. So thank you for today's podcast. Hope everyone's well. And take care. Thank you.